This current issue I want to introduce is a Chinese-American economic dispute. Now, firstly, let's look at the timeline. This dispute began on March 22nd when the US President Donald Trump announced an intent to impose tariffs on Chinese goods. Afterwards, the Chinese government imposed tariffs of their own over 128 US products. On the May 19th, both sides published a joint statement of the United States and China regarding trade consolidations. The US government requires China to create a fair environment and give American merchants some convenience on the trade. At the same time, China will significantly increase purchases of United States goods and services. On June 3rd, however, China had warned that all trade talks between Beijing and Washington will be void if the United States sets up trade sanctions. This is recognized as another rise of this dispute. On June 15th, Trump declared in a short statement that the United States would impose a 25% tariff on $50 billion of Chinese exports. China's Commerce Ministry accused the United States of launching a trade war and said China would respond in kind with similar tariffs for US imports, starting on July 6. I believe other people should care about this issue. The United States and China are the two biggest and most powerful countries in the world, and the relation between the two countries is always a focus in the international community. China, as an emerging challenger to the United States, shares many similarities with some other challengers like the Soviet Union, Western Europe, and Japan. At the same time, however, China is very distinctive. This country has the largest population in the world. It means China has a large domestic demand. Even if China cannot fight against America, it can still be a huge economy in the world. Also, the suffering groups of this dispute is very large. For example, farmers and high-tech industry practitioners are very important to the security of the two countries. Economy is highly related to how we produce and distribute the things we want and need from nature. Trade contains production and distribution, and even globalization in the modern international society. As I mentioned above, this dispute influences farmers in the United States when the Chinese government sanctioned and boycotted agricultural products imported from the United States. The American farmers rely heavily on exporting products to China because China is the biggest trade partner to them. The current situation is that, due to the strictness of inspections, the fruits and soybeans grown by American farmers are completely rotted and molded before entering China, and these losses will all be borne by American farmers. According to reports, China customers has detained a large number of fruits and soybeans imported from America and conducted general inspections instead of sampling inspections that were not previously conducted. In contrast, the United States government also banned the sale of Huawei, one of the Chinese biggest mobile phone manufacturers' products, and stopped supplying semiconductor chips to the Chinese telecommunication giant ZTE. If you are familiar with the economic history of the United States, I believe you must be familiar with this trade dispute between China and America, because the United States often initiates sanctions against its main competitors at a crucial moment in case they exit the United States as the world's superpower. A best example is the Cold War with the Soviet Union in the New Deal era. The United States successively used the methods of proposing capitalist camps powers in the Asian and European countries, arming confrontation, and Star Wars program to defeat the Soviet Union. After World War II and in the neoliberal era, the economy of the United States faced a new challenge from Japan. Japan's manufacturing boomed after the war. A large number of Japanese goods, like Japanese cars, went into the American market and hurt domestic car manufacturers. On September 22, 1985, the United States government signed an agreement called Plaza Accord with France, West Germany, Japan, and the United Kingdom to depreciate the US dollar in relation to the Japanese yen and German Deutschmark by intervening in the currency market. This accord resulted in Japanese yen's substantial devaluation and thus led Japan in a great economic crisis that the whole country was in a secular stagnation for around 20 years. Since the US dollar was devalued, it made the trade partners of the United States have more ability to buy the commodity made in America. In contrast, Japan suffered from it a lot. It hit Japan's export-dependent economy and led to Japanese assert price bubble. In the late 1980s, the United States government successively used this way to suppress the development of Japan's economic growth after the World War II and strengthened its economic leading status throughout the world. Also, there are many other examples that America launched trade wars or implemented some kind of protectionism to depress other countries' economies and led America in a continuous economic growth condition. In the Great Depression era, the United States signed the Small-Holding Tariff Act, a protectionism act that imposed high tariff on more than 20,000 imported goods. The highest tariff rate was close to 60%, which was the highest in the United States history in 100 years. At that time, the U.S. production capacity was already oversupplied, and restricting imports seemed to be a good solution. However, contrary to expectations, after the United States announced the increase of tariffs, trading partners did not hesitate to take retaliatory tariff measures. From 1929 to 1933, as countries increased their tariffs, U.S. imports fell by 66%, while exports fell by 61%. After World War II, in the New Deal era, a large amount of chicken was exported from the United States to Europe. In 1962, the European Community imposed tariff barriers to the frozen chicken products imported from the United States. The U.S. Congress passed the 1962 Trade. This expansion act directly authorized the president to respond to the trade protection practices. At the time, the U.S. President JFK increased the tariffs on a range of European imports including French brands, small trunks, and Volkswagen to show retaliation. The United States even threatened to reduce the number of troops stationed in Europe. In the Great Recession era, on September 11, 2009, the U.S. President Barack Obama decided to impose a tariff restriction on Chinese tires for 3 years. On December 13, 2010, the WTO rejected China's claim that the United States imposed an anti-dumping punitive tariffs on its U.S. tires. The arbitration team said that the United States imposed a punitive measure on China's sales of U.S. tires in September 2009. Tariff had not violated WTO regulations. On September 5, 2011, the World Trade Organization ruled that China lost the case. In the populist uprising era, on May 23, 2018, the U.S. Department of Commerce announced that it planned to impose a 25% or 20% tariff on some imported vehicles, and a 301 investigation on cars to Europe. But then the situation seems to be starting to turn around. On July 15, 2018, the United States President Trump and France President Macron called the EU to discuss with the United States on reducing trade barriers. However, due to Trump's decision to impose high punitive tariffs on the EU currently refused to negotiate trade agreements with the United States. As my instructor of the microeconomic class Li Zhi said in my interview video, the motivation for the United States to fight against its competitors is the national interests. Unlike competition among regions in one single country, the worldwide competition between two strongest countries is much more complicated to explain and analyze. Cultural ideology, informational and economical asymmetry, different viewpoints about globalization and protectionism can influence the development of current dispute between China and America. Also, this explains why you and I should pay enough attention to this issue from a historical and economical perspective. A solution to this problem is to promote mutual understanding between two countries. Since the Soviet Union had a different ideology with the United States and the citizens in the United States do not know Japan very much, so they use a way to trash Japanese cars in order to show their resistance of the Japanese commodities sold in America. The dispute between countries could happen. Hence, if the Chinese and the American government can thinking from the other side and improve understanding and realize the growth in two countries jointly, this problem will be solved. Okay, the last is the references and source I use. Thank you for watching and have a good day.